Hey, this is Derek Murphy of creativity.com. Tonight I'm going to be working on a ghost story horror book cover. So I'm going to kind of talk you through that process and show you a little bit of what it looks like behind the scenes. When I'm setting up a new project for a book cover, I use 1800 by 2700, just about. That's about the same as a 6 by 9 inch cover at 300 dpi. It looks kind of like that. You can change the size a little bit as you go on, but that's kind of a good starting size. My Photoshop, the way I organized all my panels is kind of a mess, so forgive that part. Over here, I've started a file, and what I do with files is I'll basically just start dragging and dropping in images. So all I've done, I took a couple things that I kind of have for inspiration. You want to be careful not to copy anything or have your design be too close to anything else. But it's good to get a few ideas. The Haunting of Hill House is kind of a nice ghost story example. This is one that my friend did, which has a really great style with the ravens and the house in the background. And then I just looked for girls in dresses. So I took a whole bunch. The author told me that this particular book is a dirty blonde kind of ghost who should be scary but a little bit attractive. But it's mostly a haunted house. So for a haunted house or almost any book cover, I also really like these. So I wanted to try to do something. I think they could work really well for kind of a scary story. So I might play around with these, and then just a bunch of girls in dresses. These are just pulled from deposit photos, which is what I've been using mainly. If you can kind of ignore the face and the color of the dress. There's a lot of white dresses, but I'll change the color later. This is just another kind of a stock photo of a haunted house background. You could just use something like this, and I might if I find the right picture, but it's generally better to make your own background. This is just like trees and a moon and the house. There's a ghost up here, but like you can make something like this on your own. It takes more time, but then you're going to have something that's going to be more unique. This is actually a historical haunted house. So this particular gown may work a little bit better because it's like the late 1800s, but I would have to change her face and her hair to blonde, which is something that I could do. So when I start off, I'm just going to make a quick kind of background. This is another cover I had in my swipe file. I'll talk more about the fonts and stuff that I'm going to choose later once the art is done. First, I just need to make some kind of a background with a haunted house. I'll do that first, and then I'll start to add in the different girl images. I tend to start by just dragging and dropping photos from deposit photos into my kind of swipe file, and then once I play around with them a while, I decide how the final design is going to look, and then I'll go back and buy the images. So I'm going to start just pulling stuff in here. This is one I found of the moon that works pretty well, except for that lady, which isn't quite right. But with Photoshop, I'm going to try to just go and use this spot healing brush. And sometimes it'll do a pretty good job of just getting rid of the background. If that's not really working, I could also go over here into the patch tool. And I can just kind of, oops. Can kind of just go like that. It's not going to be perfect, but it's kind of rough. I could go back and blur this a little bit, but just to kind of see how it looks. Then I found a few houses that might work. So I'm just going to drag those into my Photoshop file. So it's not perfect, but I added in a few different layers, some more branches and trees on the side. And then I added a little bit of fog in the road down here. So it needs a little bit of work, but you can kind of see how the background might look okay. I like how the light of the moon is coming down here on the fog. Needs to be cleaned up, but for a basic background, it could work. So I'm going to start moving in some of my girls in dresses and see how that looks. So I played around a little bit more with the different dresses. Real quick, I'll show you again what my options were. This girl's actually not bad. That could really work. I was trying to do something with these two with the head swap, but the angle isn't quite right. It's actually, I mean, it might work if I played with it more, but and I liked her expression just because it's a little bit more kind of like spooky or weird. However, I think the one I'm going to go with is this girl, but she only had a top half. So what I had to do was take that other girl in the pink dress holding a bagel, and I just cut off her top half. And I tried to fix it so that, you know, they more or less line up. I added a layer of just color because she had kind of a peach dress on, so I went over it with a blue color to kind of match. This actually might look really good if I reverse the background. So if I have the background all this brown color, or even just a black color, that blue would really pop out, as opposed to all the blue in the blue dress. And then the other one thing I did was I have this color fill, which is just solid black, but I cut a little hole. You probably can't see because it's small, but I just went over that layer with the eraser up here so that the moon shines really brightly, because that kind of looks like she's got some light. Doesn't really work. I mean, it's not exactly how the lighting would be, but it looks pretty cool. So if I was going to do a traditional haunted house, one of the other things that I probably want to do, the other reason I did this was to darken out that house even more in the windows, because then I could add some shining window brightness, probably with like a really warm yellow light for contrast. So we'll see how that looks. I could probably go to color dodge. Anyway, not perfect, but I tried to kind of put a little glowing light up there. It looks kind of cool. I'm going to try to play with some actions. So if I go to window actions, there are quite a few nice Photoshop actions you can get to add a certain style. So I'm going to look for some ghost type of actions. So I've downloaded some actions from DeviantArt called Ghost Stories, and now I can just click over here and go to play, and the action will automatically generate. It'll make a bunch of different layers. Oops, this worked a second ago. Basically, it just makes a bunch of layers, setting you some work, and it gives you kind of a cool effect. So that's what one of them called Dark Magic. That's kind of what it looks like. I could leave these and use it if I want to, or I can get rid of these, or just play around and keep the layers that I want. It actually looks pretty neat with a pink dress, but I'll kind of just need to go through the different options that I have: black ice, fog monster, blackout. Oops. These actually work a lot better if you have one flattened background area. So I just flattened my art and combined it all. I kept a different version with all the layers just to make sure I can go back. So by playing with all the different options, I can get some colors and styles that I think look pretty good. And then what I'll usually do is just copy different variations and put it back into my main original file. And then I can use, if I want to, I could blend it together or change the opacity and mess around with it until it's how I want it. I could just go straight for like color also. So this is already looking not terrible. It could look a lot better once I go back and clean it all up, but it's kind of how I like it. There's a lot of light coming over here. I'd kind of like to take her arm and put it up and hold like a candlestick or something and have a lot of light focused in this area. I'm not going to do that right now because that would take quite a while. I'm going to jump ahead to text. So if we kind of have our basic art, we can start playing around with where we're going to put our text. So I pulled in some fonts. I'll kind of show you what I'm playing around with. Generally, I think a simple serif, sans serif font works best for horror, but I'll show you kind of what that looks like. Also with a lot of spacing, the more spread out it is, the better. It'll give it that cinematographic feel. So some of the fonts I just pulled up to show you what it could like, even if they're poor choices. This is one that I like quite a bit. Might be something that's final. It's more like a historical haunting. Another one like this could also work. This one's definitely science fiction, doesn't work at all. This one's kind of classy. I'd want to change it so it's taller. I feel like horror fonts or ghost fonts can be a little bit taller. Normally you don't want to stretch your fonts too much because it'll look weird, but a little bit might be okay. I've been trying to put the text up here on top of the roof, underneath this glow of the moon, but it's a little bit distracting and a little bit too bright with the glow effect that I have, so it kind of washes it out. So I'm not totally set on that. There's another one that's very horror, very maybe vampire or supernatural. So if this isn't like a supernatural romance or vampire cover, which it isn't, that's probably the wrong choice. This one's more like a axe murderer survival, so it's definitely horror, but it's not really historical ghost horror. So it's kind of like you got to be careful what kind of book it is and what kind of people you're attracting. The font dictates the genre, even though they should be able to tell from the background that this is a horror. They don't necessarily know if it's ghost or haunting or what. This is actually, the title is Alice Snow. I added the haunting of. I'm not sure if the author's going to go along with that or not, but it's nice because it hits some more keywords. It makes it a little clearer that this is a haunting. Otherwise, with just the title, Alice Snow, there's not enough designation of genre, even with the art. You want to make sure the art and the text works together to let readers know exactly what it is. So this is another one that's serif. I don't typically recommend like straight serif for this type of book. However, I think it might look kind of cool if it was down close to the bottom and behind that center figure so that she's kind of blocking out some of the letters. I can't do that really easily right now, but I'll show you what it might look like. Something like that, so it kind of goes behind her a little bit. That could actually look really nice if I played with it some more. But for now, I'm going to go back to one of these other options. Probably this one looks fine. And I could do the same thing and put the title down below. I typically like to have my author name at the bottom and the title up on top. But in this particular case, you don't want your title or your text blocking too much of the art. It should fit into the art and not really stand out. So possibly I could move all of this stuff down here and it might look really good. Something like that. And then I could put the author name up on top where it's not really blocking anything significant. I don't know. I tend to think that's unbalanced most of the time. I'd have to redo all this art. So that's probably not the way I'm going to do it. It's rare that I like the author name on top, but sometimes if the art demands it, could be the case. Anyway, there's one more thing that I wanted to do, which was add a little bit of decoration around the borders, which you don't generally have to do. You don't want to get too fancy or carried away. But there's a lot of dark space in the borders that I think I could fix a little bit. So I'm going to put this down in the corner. Something like that. Then I'll go to image adjustments, invert, and then screen. And then I might just fade that out a lot. So it's something like that. That's probably too much, especially with that curving font that I use. There's too much stuff going on. But if I used a simpler font, it might be worth it if I could get away with adding the decoration, because together it really does look pretty cool. One more tiny thing I forgot, and this is pretty silly. This is definitely an example of over-design, but I thought it might be kind of cool to add a screaming face into the moon up here. Something like that. So it doesn't look that terrible. It's kind of cool, but it's also a little distracting. It's probably too much stuff going on in this cover already, but if done well with simple fonts, cleaner fonts, that might actually look pretty decent once it's cleaned up a bit. Okay, bye-bye. Okay, one more tiny thing. Sometimes you can get away with font substitution, which means if you have a different element that kind of resembles the letter that it should be there. For example, this is Alice Snow. There's no I in Alice, but because she takes the place of the I, it kind of looks all right. People might be able to guess. It's a little bit awkward, but it also looks a lot better to have this name much bigger and filling in all of this space. So it's not a terrible way to end it. And I also changed all the colors to a weird green, which doesn't have to be like that. I'll show you the alternative. If I can find the color layer. All I did was blend this background layer to a color, and I can actually go up to image adjustments, hue and saturation, and I could play around with all kinds of different colors to make it look how I want it. That one's kind of cool. I could up the saturation a lot. The other way to do this would be to go to window and adjustments, and then I could go to hue and saturation, and I could just change everything this way, which is kind of fun to play around with once you've got things set up. Okay, bye-bye, thanks.